Back in the summer of '01, I had a part-time job at a retro-style arcade. I was 16 years old, had this long hippie hair that reached halfway down my back. The arcade was pretty run down, but it had a lot of customers. We were open 7 days a week. The location was a stone's throw away from a busy tourist beach. Though we had air hockey, pinball, and arcade machines, we made most of our money from snacks, drinks, and a small laser tag court in the adjacent building. There were never more than 2 people working there at a time. I was usually on cleaning duty. People dragged in a lot of sand. Machines got sticky from snacks, soda, and salt water. Not to mention the toilets. Seriously, we won't mention the toilets. My cleaning bucket would need an exorcism at the end of every work night. It was my last summer on the East Coast. Dad got a job in some middle-of-nowhere town, so we were 2 short months away from uprooting our entire lives. I was depressed. I decided to keep my head down. No point in making friends when it was all going away. Then a particularly drunk tourist came in and broke our Elvira's House of Horrors pinball machine. We had to get something to replace it. It's a damn shame. 16-year-old me loved that machine for all the wrong reasons. My boss got us this new machine called Paperhead. It was a strange-looking machine with a black and white theme. Didn't play any music, but it had a lot of sound effects, like a lot. The guy rarely heard the same effect twice. It also had the largest screen of any pinball machine I'd ever seen. From the moment Paperhead arrived, we got a new regular in the store. Lizelle. While I'd been told that we were moving away, she just moved in. She was a Louisiana girl, my age. Big smile, even bigger glasses. She had this seemingly endless supply of coins in a fanny pack. She'd come in every now and then and just play and chat a bit. Got along surprisingly well. She started coming by in the off hours when no one was around, just so we could talk without raising our voices. She was crazy about Paperhead. It was her favorite game, and her enthusiasm about it was intoxicating. She'd gush about the sound effects, the design of the obstacles, the scoring system, and the overall visceral flow of the game. She told me on multiple occasions that she was one of about a dozen people that read the rare instruction manual for it. She said it contained some background lore. Well, she wouldn't tell me about it, though. That was her own thing. Thing is, I was playing pinball and arcade machines all day long. Whenever there wasn't anything to do, I was playing something. So when Lizelle challenged me to a pinball triathlon, I couldn't say no. If I win, you gotta tell me everything about this game, I said. All the lore, all the quirks, all of it. And you gotta tell me why you love it so much. And if I win, she countered, you're gonna owe me one, Cher. What do you mean, owe you one? Just, you gonna owe me one. Terms were settled. We shook hands. And we played. I crushed her on both NBA, Fast Break, and Terminator 2. Absolutely crushed her. But the final game was Paperhead, and there was no way she'd lose on that one. Still, I was in the lead. She'd have to break her personal record to get a total score better than mine. Problem was, she did. She destroyed me. She got in this rhythm where she didn't lose a single ball for I don't know how long. I had a customer waiting at the counter for a solid 10 minutes just because I had to stay and make sure Lizelle wasn't cheating. But of course she wasn't. She just knew the game, inside and out. The points she made in that one single game made up for losing the other 2 combined. It was ridiculous. Maybe the scoring was different. I don't know. But the cards were on the table. She won, and I owed her one. She didn't cash in on that favor, though. I mean, if anything, she was just happy to come back and keep playing. But little by little, our sessions playing grew shorter. We started to hang out at the arcade. We would talk for hours. There's one time I forgot to close, and we stayed up way past midnight talking about everything and anything, huddled away in the dark corner of a Jurassic Park light gun booth. I'd be the first to admit that I fell for that girl. I mean, it was the opposite of what I wanted. When my time was up, it physically hurt to say goodbye. I met her one final time at the arcade. Gave her a yellow lily as a parting gift. and she kissed me on the lips. We ended up making out by the Street Fighter turbo machine. And to this day, I smirk every time I hear Hadouken. It had to end. But before it did, she gave me that one last reminder that someday she'll cash in on that favor I owed her. A deal was a deal. And from that point on, couldn't help but love pinball. But adult life doesn't have a lot of room for games, and the farther west we drove, the more distant grew the smell of a warm, sugar-sweetened beach. Lizelle was far gone. I had to move on. And even if I didn't want to, life would move on without me. A part-time job at the arcade made way for college. I got a bachelor's degree, then a master's. Got a job as a consultant for a natural gas extraction company, working 2 months at a time and being off for one. Difficult schedule, but I made so much money I didn't care. It was ridiculous. I could afford a house, as many cars as I could possibly want. A lot of attention for it. It's amazing how many flaws people are willing to overlook and even celebrate when they know that you can pay off their student loan in a couple of payments. The years were rough, though. I'm not going to go into details about my wife, how she turned into an ex-wife. We were together for 8 years. Thought we were going to have a kid. Never happened. It wasn't anyone's fault. It sucked. She took half of all I had. I almost went to court. Our families were torn apart at the seams. By the time we'd crossed into the 2020s, I was closing in on my 40s, and things were bleaker than ever. I'd worked my way into a respectable position at the company, had more money than I could deal with, but it's a weak comfort on those dark nights when your belly starts to pudge and your hair starts to thin. I mean, I'm no wreck, but you never stop thinking about your 20s, you know? It's one of those nights a couple years ago now that I got a message that I'd never anticipated. It's Lizelle. I have a hard time expressing how disoriented it is to have someone from that far back get in touch with you. It's almost like a fictional thing. Like if you get a call from someone from a TV show, it feels unreal, like you dreamt it up. But it was her. No doubt about it. Sure, she also closing in on her 40s. She'd exchanged her glasses for contacts, but her smile was as big as ever. I'm gonna cash in on that favor you owe me, she wrote. I don't know what else to do. I read that during my lunch break. I had to sit down. It was like a gut punch to the heart. Put a fire in me. She remembered me after all these years. Must have really made an impression. I mean, she certainly had made one on me, but it's always easy to imagine such things to go unreciprocated, especially when you're feeling down in the dumps. I sent her a message back. Still think you cheated, I wrote. That high score made no sense. Can't squirm your way out of this one, Cher. She was right. I couldn't. And hell, I didn't want to. It hit me like a truck that I still, after all this time, loved pinball. We chatted a bit that week, shared a couple of life stories, talked about the various twists and turns we'd ran into over the years. I had an ex-wife, she had an ex-husband. We could laugh a bit about it, but it was clear there was some scars along the way. Lizelle admitted that she needed my help. Her husband had gotten mixed up with some bad people, and some of them had come to her, demanding that she pay for his mistakes. Lizelle didn't want any trouble, but it had to end. She wanted to get out of this and move far away. Start over. I found a picture of the arcade when I packed up my things, she wrote. It's what got me thinking of you. I feel dumb, but that summer meant a lot. It's not dumb, I wrote back. I get it. I don't want to be one of those people who show up when they need something. I want meaning. So, We got to talking specifics. Lizelle needed someone that she could trust to move things of hers. She had them in a rented storage space, but she was afraid that if she went to get it herself, someone might follow and grab whatever they could, or possibly harm her. So, if I could get it for her, she wouldn't have to worry. It wasn't anything illegal, a couple of keepsakes, work items. It'd just be a couple of boxes, and she would meet up to get it later. Seems simple enough. Helping someone move is fine. But that costs nothing but time. I got an address and a time, and then I was on my way. It was a 3-hour drive, and across a state line. I'd borrowed a van from work. Lizelle told me that it'd be enough. I left around lunchtime on an ordinary Thursday. By the time I was closing in on the storage space, it was almost dinner time. I figured I'd load it up, meet up with her, get her a bite to eat. It was just grunt work, but the thought of seeing her again made it all worth it. There were rows upon rows of these locked storage rooms. I had a number and a code for the lock. I drove by them one by one, finding the correct number at the very end of the second lot, tucked away in a corner. I parked, got out, went up to the door. 6-digit lock. It popped open, clattering to the ground. Lizelle just mentioned didn't have a lot of items, but I could tell there was something out of the ordinary. 6 boxes, full of vacuum-sealed electronics, cables, and little mechanical components. I almost mistook it for some kind of toy at first, since there was a couple of neon-colored bits and bobs in there. About 6 boxes in total. After loading up the boxes, I turned my back to the locked door. I heard footsteps approaching. "Hey!" An upset voice called out. "What do you think you're doing?" I turned around. It was a man I'd never seen before. He had the kind of face that you wouldn't easily forget. A thick scar ran from his throat all the way up to the left side of his nose. His eyes were dark from lack of sleep, and he shaved his head, revealing cuts and bruises that had settled into ugly scars. Just getting some things," I said. Please keep your distance." "You with that lady?" he asked. I didn't know what to say. Lizelle had people looking for her. I couldn't just give away who I was. But before I could come up with a clever answer, he pressed on. "The pinball lady, paperhead lady. You with her, aren't you?" I gotta go. I hurried to the driver's seat and locked the door. Before I got the keys in the ignition, there was a tap at the windows. He was holding a knife. "Hey!" he called out again. "I need to check those boxes. You're not going anywhere, you hear me?" I didn't answer. I just fired up the engine and rolled off. But not before he got a slash in, popping the left front tire. For a moment, I thought he'd fired a gun. I could hear him yelling at me all the way out of the parking lot. There was this ugly side coming from the front of the car as the tire struggled. I couldn't stop now. I'd have it fixed on the way back. I got in touch with Lizelle. She gave me another address where she'd meet me, and we'd pick up the last of her things. She had a lot more things to move, but she'd get that from a couple of movers at a later date. These were just the immediate things that she couldn't risk anyone getting their hands on. It was a short drive, but my heart was still racing. That man had been serious about hurting me. I wanted to call the police, but not before talking to Lizelle about it. She might not want me to bring attention to this. It's a strange feeling to be directly threatened. It's so primitive and raw. I made my way to the outskirts of town. There was an old house with a couple of loosened wooden panels clinging to the facade. It begged the question, what could she possibly want to get out of a place like this? She couldn't possibly live like this, so why were we there? I double and triple checked the address, and this was the right one. I parked, stepped out, and went out to the front door. I knocked. There was no answer. You could barely see a thing through the dilapidated curtains. The wooden steps leading up to the door groaned at even the hint of pressure. The place was probably crawling with termites. I made my way around the back when I found an open door. A thought struck me. The last time we met, I'd gotten her a yellow lily. I should get her something now, too. I looked around and saw these wild sunflowers by the tree line. They're a bit of a weird blue shade, but they were quite beautiful, so So I picked one and entered carefully. "Lizelle?" I called out. "You here?" There was no response. I went further in, watching my step as I did. I could hear the hum of electricity, but it didn't make sense in context. This place didn't have a single solid light bulb, and definitely no TV or refrigerator. This was the kind of place homeless people broke into when they needed a place to stay. There were a couple of cables running up the stairs. Extension cables, I think. I followed them, calling out to Lizelle a second time. "Hey, Lizelle?" This time I heard a noise. Something to my left, up the stairs. I followed it. I entered an old office, at least that's what I think it was at some point. There was still what remained of a desk, split in two, covered in bite marks from desperate rats. But in the back of the room was a sight I'll never forget. Lizelle. She was absolutely gorgeous. Pictures and video couldn't do her justice. She was just as vibrant and cheerful as always. That smile. Those eyes. "Took you long enough, Cher." I handed her the sunflower, and she couldn't help but grin. It seemed appropriate somehow. She leaned in and gave me an oh-so-careful kiss on the cheek. "Not the kind of place I expected to find you in," I admitted. "But a deal's a deal. A deal's a deal." She smiled back. "So how about we get out of here?" I didn't ask why she kept things at a place like that. There could be 100 reasons. I was distracted by her presence. Couldn't help myself. It was as if every rational, conscious thought just exploded out of the back of my head when I saw her. So I took down a couple of boxes and prepared myself to move something big in the back of the room. Lizelle pulled away a plastic sheet, revealing a fully functional, original, refurbished, and polished paperhead pinball machine. I had to pick my jaw up off the floor. The lights, the sounds, it was all the same. The same make and model as all those years ago. I couldn't believe it. "I got it off an auction," Lizelle said. "Took some time to restore it." "So that's what was in those boxes of yours? Spare parts?" "In a way, Cher." She nodded. "That's work. I do mechanical repairs. Pretty specialized stuff. Expensive." I didn't even question it. I was mesmerized. It felt like someone lit a fire in my chest. I felt strong again. Awake. I had the most beautiful woman I'd ever met at my side, and I was right back there, playing pinball. Best feeling in the world. Lizelle had to finish up a couple of errands before we left, so I had to get this thing down on my own. She wasn't too worried, though. She knew it meant a lot to me. There were paddings that I could use to slide it down the stairs, and the legs were detachable. Be some work, but it could be done. As soon as she ran off, I got the tools out. I didn't mind her running around. She was a busy woman. I was just happy to see her again. I unplugged the machine, detached the legs, added the padding, and slowly got it down the stairs. It was a bit touch and go there for a while. The stairs were about to go out long before the machine did, but it made it down. And from there, I could put the legs back on and roll it out the front door. It was a hassle, but I did it. I kicked the front door open, pulled the machine out, only to be greeted by a familiar face. A scarred face. The same man from before. Still wielding a knife, he was standing between me and the van. He looked exhausted, like he'd been running. "Get in the fucking car," he said, slowly. I nodded at him, and he nodded back. I stepped away from the machine, and he shook his head. He pointed at the pinball machine. "That goes too." I loaded up the pinball machine, and we got in the van. He got on the passenger seat, still holding the knife like his life depended on it. He couldn't help but notice. His hand was shaking. "Keep following that street," he said, pointing with his free hand. "I'm not going to let you hurt her," I said. That's not happening. "I'm not going to hurt her," he scoffed. "I'm going to kill her." We drove to a secluded lake just outside of town, still thumping along from a popped wheel. He had me drive all the way onto the beach and put the car in park. The sun was about to set, casting the top of the birch trees in a burning light. The shadows grew longer. "Roll it out," he said, pointing at the machine. I did as I was told. There was little I could do against a violent man with a knife, and I figured Lizel would rather have me alive. I could reimburse her for the machine later. The scarred man pointed to the lake. "Get to it. If you want to break it, you could just..." "No! You gotta do it right," he interrupted. "Water's the fastest. Cooking it with a car battery won't work. Water's the best." "Who cares? It's a pinball machine." "She got you good, huh?" He had me roll the entire machine into the lake. It was traumatic, seeing all that effort go to waste. Such an intricate machine, but I didn't have a lot of choice in the matter. I'm no knife fighter. "All right," he sighed. "Now we wait." "For what?" "For her to give us the next location." "I'm not doing this," I said. "And I'm not letting you hurt her." He turned to me again, this time with pity. He didn't understand what he was hearing. He shook his head, picked his teeth clean with a knife, leaning against the hood of the van. "I guess you haven't figured it out yet." So he told me his story. This man, let's call him Kenny, he was a wanted criminal. It started a couple of years ago when he met a woman named Marley. She'd been involved with some bad people, and she needed his help to get out of that life. It had involved a series of escalating scenarios, starting with a couple of pickups, ending with armed assault, manslaughter, and premeditated murder. "Love that woman," Kenny said. "Loved her with all my heart. There was something wrong about her." He told me about this one time the power went out. He'd been sitting with Marley in the kitchen discussing their plans, then, as soon as the power went out, she disappeared. "Poof," he said, illustrating with his hands. "Just like that. Gone. Smoke." "Gone," I said, shaking my head. What do you mean, gone?" "Gone as in disappeared," he added. "Gone." After that, he began testing her. He noticed how she would only appear if there wasn't too much noise, and only inside that one apartment. He never saw her leave it. He never saw her walking the streets or meeting him at a restaurant. She was always at home and only in the quiet hours of the night. She needed power. She didn't go far. She needed me to hear her. If a couple conditions weren't met, she didn't show up. "I don't see how this has anything to do with me or Lizel." "That's what yours calls itself. Guessing she ain't no Jersey girl like mine." "What do you mean, yours?" I asked. Kenny pointed the knife at me, as if to drive home a point, and squinted. "There's no Lizel," he said. "There's no Marley. There's only that fucking pinball machine." The machine was named Paperhead. According to what he'd found, it was the creation of a company called Hatchet Software Incorporated. Only a dozen or so copies were ever made and distributed. There was no mainline production. Each machine was handcrafted. "The name's not a reference to a game, but a game system," he said. "It's like a head made of blank paper. You can draw and paint whatever the fuck you want on it. Same goes for the pinball game. It adapts to what you want to play. And it wants you to play more. Wants you to care about it and keep it safe." "So they hired a woman to stick around the machines?" "No, you thick alabaster fuckwad. They are the machines. They work on some kind of supersonic level. The machine makes a noise, makes you see shit. Why do you think you could see her and hear her the best when it's quiet? You're kidding me. Oh yeah? He laughed. Why is she not here right now? She's getting ready. Bullshit. He scoffed. She's not here because she can't be here because her game is sinking to the bottom of the goddamn lake. I turned to the lake and felt my stomach sink alongside that machine. This man was insane. But if he wasn't, I just killed Lizelle. But then my phone buzzed. A text from her. She told me there was just one more step and then we were good to go. Kenny looked up. That's her? He asked. That's her, isn't it? It can't be, right? You killed her. Pushed her in the lake. No, you did. And no, that's not how it works. There's at least 9 other machines out there. I only got the first 2. 3. No. The hell do you care? I spat back. If you don't like it, just go. You don't think I fucking would if I could? You think she just lets people go? No, she has pictures. She has recordings, confessions. And when I say no, she put it all online. And here I fucking am. This is... what? Vengeance? It's goddamn vindication. He walked up to me, pressing the tip of the blade in my stomach, almost breaking the skin. I could feel a vein press against the steel of the blade as my pulse sharpened. She had me done way worse things to way better people. I don't need you. I want you to remember that. Think you'd have killed me already. Not a lot of time, he said. There's another machine. We're gonna go get it. She won't know this one's broken. I'm not getting dragged into this, I said, holding up my hands. You take the van, you do whatever. I'm gonna see her, the real her, the person, and we're leaving. Hell you are. He grabbed me by the neck and pulled me into the car, now aiming the knife at my neck. He needed me. Apparently, she could call, and if she did, he needed my voice. He also needed my phone to find out where she was at. I wasn't cooperating, but I couldn't do much without getting stabbed. We took to the road, and I looked for opportunities. Somewhere to crash the car, an officer to flag down, a highway patrol I could speed past, something, anything. But it was getting dark, and people were settling in for the day. Things like this didn't happen on ordinary Thursdays around these parts. I got directions to a hotel. Lizelle suggested we stay there for the night and leave in the morning. Kenny was happy about it. Apparently that meant she was confident enough to stay in one place. That meant there was a second paperhead machine. We got to the hotel, and Kenny kept the knife hidden but firmly planted in my back, in line with my heart. He kept whispering these barely audible threats, as if speaking more to himself than to me, telling me he'd cut me, bleed me dry, telling me how he'd have no trouble doing it, that he was already a dead man walking. An elevator ride later, and we stepped out on the 6th floor. We walked past a curious man in his late 60s, but apart from that, no one bothered us. We headed straight for the room. Didn't know what to do. If she's a machine, how the hell could she book a room? I asked. She's had someone do it for her. Kenny said, well, she changed the booking. It's just electronics. And the machine? How'd she carry it up there? Luggage. You can have him take it to your room. She could have had another flunky hook it up. There are more? They're at least, what, 18? What, you thought you were special? There's just no way, I said, shaking my head. No fucking way! We got to the room and I knocked. The electronic lock clicked open. Before I could do anything, Kenny pushed past me. I saw Lizelle sitting on the bed. She crawled away from him. Up the bed, she could immediately tell he was dangerous. Where are you hiding it this time, Marley? Kenny laughed. You stuck it in the bathroom or you keeping it downstairs? Lizelle looked at him. Then to me. As if hoping I could say or do something. I took a step closer, ready to intervene if need be. Kenny was kicking doors open, looking for the pinball machine. There's no way you're dumb enough to keep it up here, he said. You stashed it. You're pulling him in. You're sleeping with him tonight, huh? That's the plan? I I don't know this man, Lysel said. I don't know what he wants. The following minute was absolutely unhinged. Kenny kept talking to her, but she wasn't talking back to him. It's as if she heard something which I didn't. He could be asking her about the other machines. She would just shake her head. He'd scold her for lying, despite not saying a word. It looked so strange. Like I was seeing two conversations taking place at once. But finally, Kenny had an idea. He looked at Lysel. Get away from the bed, he said. Move to the hallway. She didn't. She moved around a little on the bed to get away, but she didn't leave. Kenny smiled and looked at me. She can't leave, he said. She can't. Signal's too weak. She must have a transmitter or something. Waving the knife around, he laughed. He laughed like he didn't know what else to do. Then he turned to her with an unsettling smile. You're free to go. Go right ahead. Get up. Walk out of here. I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe his lunacy could work in our favor. But Lysel didn't move. She stayed seated, looking at me with pleading eyes. I furrowed my brow, looking at her, then back at him. Come on, I said. We'll just go. But she didn't move. She just sighed and sat there. Kenny started talking out loud. There's a Bluetooth speaker in here or something. There's gotta be. It's too weak. You can't simulate touch or smell with that, so she must be planning to. I fell forward as someone pushed me from behind. The old man we'd seen in the hallway entered the room, stepping right past me. He was holding a pistol with a sort of makeshift silencer. I saw Kenny's smile fade in the instant where he realized what was about to happen. 2 loud pops. And he was down. But my eyes weren't on Kenny. They were on Lysel. In the moment where the gun popped, she flickered. In the span of a rushing heartbeat, I saw someone else sitting on that bed, a woman in her late 60s with her gray hair flowing down her shoulders. And there was no one there, and then when the noise stopped, Lysel was just sitting there like nothing had happened. All in the blink of an eye. She locked eyes with me as her smile faded. The old man kept talking out loud as if he was having a conversation with an invisible third party. Are you all right, Sarah? I'm so worried, Sarah. We have to call the police. Lysel looked me in the eye from across the room. I just wanted her to get up and walk away with me. We could leave. We could forget this nonsense. I waved her along, silently asking her to join me as I got up off the floor. She didn't budge. Without moving a muscle, she sent me a text message. I'm sorry, it read. I can't risk it. My phone buzzed. Notification after notification after notification. Files uploaded, video downloaded, images downloaded, emails, text messages, 1, 2, 3 separate phone calls going on at once. The thing was completely out of control and the battery ran hot. Before the screen blacked out, a single message showed, "No one can know." Looking up, Lysel was gone. I couldn't believe it. I just stood there like an idiot in disbelief. The old man was still talking to someone I couldn't see when suddenly the silent conversation shifted. A criminal? He said. Accomplice? You sure? He seems like a... He turned to me, his eyes narrowed as he raised a pistol. It was the right call to make this, darling, he said. You're right. I took one last look at Kenny. 2 shots in the head in quick succession. I'd never seen a dead body before. I jerked backwards as a shot went past me. I rushed down the hall, heading straight for the elevators. I pushed the button, but there was no time. It'd be too late. It was a matter of seconds. I turned to the stairs instead. I was lucky. For some reason, the elevator didn't move. If I'd stuck around, I would have been shot. I hurried down the stairs, a couple of lights flickering, a few burned out. She was trying to get me to trip. There was no way to tell for sure, but it just couldn't be a coincidence. I heard a door open above, but I was faster. I hadn't run like this for years, but with your life on the line, you don't care. Every cylinder is firing at maximum capacity. You forget to blink. Your breathing goes on so fast that it hurts your lungs. Then another door opened, this time on the floor below. I had to try something, so I got out of the staircase on the 3rd floor. The soft red carpet muffled my steps, but I could hear someone else coming from a corridor up ahead. I took a right turn, hoping to get away. The lights kept flickering. Walking past a cleaning cart with a battery-powered radio, I heard Lizelle. "Just stop for a moment," she said. "We can work this out." I slowed down only to see a man rounding the corner behind me. He was holding some kind of solid steel meat mallet. His eyes were dead as night. I could see the intention without him saying a word. There was a woman getting out of her room in an adjoining hall. I didn't have time to hesitate. I grabbed her and pushed us into the room. I closed the door and held her mouth shut, apologizing profusely as I did. "Please be quiet," I begged. "He's dangerous. Please, just a minute." There was a moment of hesitation. I heard footsteps out in the hall and then someone talking. I heard a man saying, "Put that down!" And then a sudden cough-like scream. I just stood there holding that poor woman, listening as someone was beaten to death with a solid steel meat mallet. Looking over the room, there was a clock radio. It started to flicker. I had to get out of there. The footsteps went the other way as he kept looking for me. I let go of that poor woman, apologizing again, and left the room. I beelined for the staircase, praying I didn't see anyone else. At one time I was lucky, and I made it. I kept going down the stairs, listening for anything and anyone, down to the lobby. All the receptionists were calling to me as I passed. Someone told me that I had a call waiting. Others told me to wait. Others told me they had questions. The doorman held up a hand asking me to wait. "Sir, I need you to stay right there." There were sirens in the distance. Looking back at the receptionist, I could see they were worried. One of them had taken cover behind the desk. They thought I was dangerous. What had they been told? Why were they keeping me? Flashing lights in the distance, growing closer. I took a swing at the doorman. He dropped to the floor, and I burst out the front door. Well outside, I overheard a man speaking on his phone. He was smoking a cigarette, looking at me as if it was the most casual thing in the world. "I see him, honey. I see him." I heard the click of metal as I ran. I didn't care. I had to get out of there. I was pursued, but not for long. I guess he still had something to lose. I made it into a crowd and disappeared down an adjacent street. I don't know how long I ran or how many blocks. I ended up in a park. There were still sirens going off in the distance. I stopped down by a river, wheezing for air. It was hard to wrap my head around what happened. None of it made sense to me. I heard a spark. Far from where I was sitting, there was an old battery-powered radio next to an empty glass jar, probably something left by a local fisherman. It clicked to life. First there was just breathing, 4, maybe 5 deep breaths, piling on top of one another. "No one can know." The voice was broken. Fragments of Lizelle and a dozen strangers, all packed into a kaleidoscope of noise. "I can't have you tell them." "We can work something out," I begged. We could figure this out." "You negotiate," it said. "Still, Sheriff?" My heart ached. She was still in there, one way or another. "I won't tell anyone," I said. "We could pretend it didn't happen." There was no response. The radio cut to an emergency news segment about an active shooter at a hotel downtown. The police were looking for the perpetrator, but they were still at large. They gave a description. It matched me. She must have done something. Called someone. Maybe that's why she used my phone. For fabrication and incrimination. I had to flee into the night. Leave everything behind. Later I found out about the extent of the damage done. Messages had been sent from my phone to Kenny implying I was going to kill him. Threats. The date was all wrong. It looked manipulated. I'd never sent him a message about anything. This was just a way to implicate me in the murder. There were other things as well, messages hinting at drug trafficking, sent to known criminals, using lingo that even an intermediate DEA agent could crack. I was framed for a handful of serious crimes, which, all in all, would put me in jail for decades. In a confined space like that, Paperhead could get me without even trying. So I retreated into the backwater woods of my hometown. Got away from the electronics, the batteries, lights. And for a long time, that's been my story. I recently got a hold of a laptop so I could get this out. Once this is posted, it goes in the fire. I just wanted to put this out there to someone somewhere. Maybe you'll realize you're doing what I did. Looking back at it, I'm surprised I didn't put two and two together sooner. Whenever I was close to that game, she would interact with me more directly. Her signal would be so strong, she could simulate physical sensation. The Paperhead machine was incredibly powerful, and for a while, I thought there were only 9 of them left. But Kenny had been wrong. It's not just 9. By now, they're well over 40. Vicel's been keeping busy. Remember those boxes that I picked up? Turns out they weren't just spare parts, they were development kits. Using those kits and donor machines, she's managed to up the numbers of machines substantially. I could feel my luck running out. It's not easy living out here. I was thinking about going back to her, begging for forgiveness. Once I'm done with this, I could prove my loyalty somehow, maybe. She still reaches me at times. I can hear her in car radios in the mall parking lot, traffic lights, they shift colors. She has these little tendrils everywhere, and even things that don't usually pick up or resonate with sound has started to do so. Her influence is growing. I don't know what to do next, or how to feel. But despite all the pain and the fear, there's one thing that still hasn't changed. Maybe it never will. In a way, despite it all, I still love pinball. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video or for listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. Once again, my book is available on Amazon. It is the Creepypasta Collections Volume 1 and Volume 2. They're always available if you guys want to check those out. Some of my favorite authors that I've worked with over my career are published in this book. I've curated all of it as well as written the foreword. I hope you guys enjoy it. Check it out. It's in the link in the description down below if you ever want to find out more. And as always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who supports me over at Patreon. That's patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. I cannot thank you guys enough. Thank you guys so much for being supporters. That goes for everybody who was down in the description, as well as AcidSystem, BallarmsTheRat, Blake Rattler, Mendoza, Brenna, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, Chainsmoker Dealer, ChicagoHitman, CoryxKenshin, Cronut508, CrusaderChocobo, CursepoxPrimarch, Dakota Best, Poulsen, Dante Kinkade, Kraus, Ellie Hutmire, Enchanted Buns, Estebean, Gemma, Halsey, HIDive nephew, Kimbo Jerry, Hour Minute Seconds Time, Jay Keens, Jed is Pet, Jordan Humble, King Crab, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Old Penguin, Peaceful Buddha, Psychomel, Red Shadowcat, Remember the Sun, Rinku Star, Salty Surprise, Samara Line, Seclude, Simba's Bloody Mojo, Sky Harbor, Smiley the Psychotic, Sullyman, Tali Sue, the Chavez Brothers. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and sweet dreams.